Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation on Environmental Health and Action, your guide to saving the planet. My name is Lauren Smith, and I'm an AmeriCorps member serving with Conservation Nebraska's Common Ground program. Conservation Nebraska's mission is to protect our state's natural legacy by educating the public, supporting communities, and increasing civic engagement, which we accomplish through locally led education efforts like this and community engagement projects to address local conservation concerns. Before I introduce today's speaker, there are a few rules to go over. For those joining online, your cameras will remain off and you will be muted throughout the presentation. Please type any questions you have in the chat or the Q&A section throughout the webinar. But if you want to save your questions until the end, that works as well. Following the presentation, we will have a very brief survey that should only take less than a minute to complete. The survey helps support programming like this one, so we very much greatly appreciate you taking the time to fill those out. Someone is asking the length of this webinar. We're hoping to wrap up right at 1 just to be respectful of your guys' time, especially because I know you could be over the lunch hour. But yes.
And I'll get a good chunk of it, even if you're only available for 30 minutes.
Yes.
I think you'll get the meat of it.
Yes, and then so today we welcome Sarah Mason from the Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department, and I will let her introduce herself and take it away. Thank you again, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you all for spending your afternoon with me. And thank you, Conservation Nebraska, for the opportunity to tell folks a little bit more about the work that we do each and every day to protect the environment. Before I launch into our work on the Guide to Saving the Planet, I just want to give you a little bit more context about where I fit into the team at Environmental Public Health at Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department. And I'm supposed to click and my slide, there we go, progresses. Okay, super. So in Environmental Public Health, we work to protect and promote health for all people in Lincoln and Lancaster County. And we do this in a variety of ways. We have an air team that monitors air quality and lets the public know when there are risks related to outdoor air. We have folks who prevent illness and disease caused by poor indoor air quality, think like mold, healthy homes. We have folks who permit body art and food establishments. There are some people on that team who also work with local childcare centers to prevent the spread of infectious disease. We have a water team, and they work within the county with our contractors, homeowners, realtors, and pool operators to make sure that we've got safe water. And finally, we have a team that works on waste and hazardous materials. Those folks respond to nuisance conditions. They permit the waste haulers and processors when you think about things like recycling or scrap metals. They also provide emergency response and support for our hazmat team at LFR, at Lincoln Fire and Rescue. So under these topics, some areas have educators, such as myself, and we are able to provide classes, consultation, or behavior change initiatives. So I'm one of those educators in that waste section, specifically working on litter and waste reduction. I also promote Has2Go, Lincoln's Hazardous Waste Center, which is a drive-through service for residents at no cost to manage their household hazardous waste. I couldn't resist the opportunity to plug the program here. So let's start with a little primer in waste. So Lincoln's pretty rare in the way we set up our hauling market. We have an entirely competitive hauling market for waste. That means that whether you're putting garbage into a toter or recycling into a toter, once it gets to the curb, it's being hauled by a private business. The theory is that all this competition will drive consumer costs lower and be a catalyst for innovation. So if we were to follow that garbage from the toter into the garbage truck, we then see it go to the landfill. Pretty straightforward. Now the landfill, the Bluff Road landfill, is owned and operated by the city of Lincoln. So we see ourselves as stakeholders in stewarding the landfill. If we follow your recyclables, it's a different story. It's going to go to one of 3 independent MRFs, or material recovery facilities. Could go to Star City Recycling, could go to First Star Recycling, or Green Quest Recycling. And what makes it challenging is that each of these MRFs, which is really where we're sorting processing the recycling, they all have unique contracts set up to sell their bales of material. So like a bale of aluminum or a bale of cardboard. And that means the messaging about what's acceptable in one MRF can be different than what's acceptable in a different MRF. And so the linchpin then is where your materials are getting hauled. So when I talk about recycling, I'm talking about curbside recycling that usually goes in a blue bin. We're talking about cardboard, aluminum, tin cans, plastic containers, paper. But that leaves a lot of other products that people want to know about. How do I get rid of it? So this is the kind of stuff that I often get questions about. Generally, people understand. In cardboard for Lincoln, we have a city code that says it can't go in the landfill, it has to go to recycling. But what does that mean for tires? So when we talk about recycling, something is recyclable if there's enough volume of it, if there's a process to break it down to material parts, and if there is an economic market to buy those component parts in order to make something new. So what's recyclable in one market may not be recyclable in another, which makes it confusing for us as consumers and individuals. So there's lots of specialized programs that do in fact recycle a specialized product that isn't one of those cardboard, tin cans, paper items that we think of in like a typical blue bin that you're putting out at your curb. There's products like lead acid batteries from cars that are made into new batteries. Sometimes people end up with waste that just has to go to a specialized place, not because it can be recycled, but because it has to be managed specially. So for instance, tires or large household appliances kind of fit in that. And there are laws that ban them from landfills here in Nebraska. So you've got to find other places to manage that waste. So myself as an educator, find myself in that role, trying to help residents figure out what in the world to do with all this stuff. So we have a product, a tool that we had used for many years to help residents figure that out. It began as a resource page to describe where these specialized waste items could go. As far as I can tell, this happened at least as far back as 1995 and has been happening ever since. When I came onto the scene in 2019, I met with Lincoln Transportation and Utilities, so another city department. They're the folks who operate and steward that Bluff Road landfill. And we met in order to update this waste reduction guide. We had some new goals for the piece. We wanted it to be more evergreen so we weren't stuck printing it and recycling copies that were old and outdated. We wanted to give more space to encourage the topics that drive us towards sustainability. We wanted to talk about reduction. We wanted to encourage people to reuse things as much as we could instead of just recycling. And we even wanted to call out the way that we shop and that influences the waste that we generate. We wanted the county to think about waste before it was ever created. We wanted people to think upstream and downstream about the purchasing of goods. We wanted to encourage the public to not just dispose of empty cans and boxes in their recycle bin, but to also think about buying a product that is then made with those recycled components. We wanted to be stewards of the landfill, and it was apparent to us that we were producing way too much waste. And we want to start moving people towards seeing waste as resource. These aren't waste items, these are resources.
Sarah, we have a question. I think you're kind of gonna get to the your guide now, but someone is asking, when was this chart of resources last updated and is it on your website?
Excellent, yes. So let me show what I think will be a more helpful tool. So to replace that chart, we started using a new tool, and that website is lincoln.ne.gov/recycle. Lauren, can you throw that in the chat? So it's lincoln.ne.gov/recycle. And when you get on that page, you're going to find the what bin does it go in tool. You could also get there by doing a Google search of what bin does it go in Lincoln, Nebraska. So when you get to this tool, it allows you to type in a search. So for instance, you're disposing of a microwave, you're going to type it in the box, and it's going to tell you where in the world it could go. We really like this tool because we could update it all the time. So someone calls from the public and says, oh, the top option on this list no longer accepts microwaves. We change it. We don't have to reprint and redo the layout. So we were pretty excited about this tool and getting it out to the public. So this solved our challenge of getting timely, accurate information into the hands of the public. And keep asking follow-up questions if that website doesn't get you everything you're hoping to
Um,
get.
Someone
Yeah,
was already asking about they don't see metal bottle caps on the what bin does it go in search tool on the website.
metal bottle cap, super. One thing that you will see is when you type something and there hasn't been it hasn't been proposed before, it's not in our database, then you get the option, I believe it's something like suggest item, and just click on that. And then the folks who manage this are partners at LTU, Lincoln Transportation and Utilities. They're going to incorporate that. But I would say probably like a metal bottle cap probably is too small to go through our recycling systems in general. You might have better luck if you were to take your cans to like a scrap metaler, a scrap metal collector. They might be able to accept those bottle caps. So kind of in the background, there's bigger stuff going on in Lincoln. I'm interacting with folks who are saying, yeah, what do I do with this bottle cap? Meanwhile, there's bigger sustainability action going on. So, and the other thing is we don't want to lose all those messages about reduce, reuse, conscious consumption. And so we didn't just want to shift to that what bin does it go in tool. So we wanted to roll in a few other things that were going on, including the climate action plan. So here you can see a few examples of the climate action plan, which is a part of Resilient Lincoln, where we were identifying local climate vulnerabilities in order to deploy strategies to build our capacity to mitigate and overcome those risks related to climate change. Within the climate plan, we've got an interconnectedness between health, economics, education, social, and transportation systems. And the output of that is 118 key initiatives that the city has been working on over the last few years. We've got 6 years to work on these 118 key initiatives. And it made us realize that just like the waste world, where we're trying to find a place to interface with the public, we needed something for our peers in water, in energy, and transportation. I mean, since we've produced our guide that I'm about to share, it's made me think, oh, wow, we probably will need to incorporate new topics as well. Like there's a local food program. So stay tuned as we make new iterations. But there's even a section of the climate action plan called Engage Residents in Co-Creating a Climate Smart Future. So Willa D. Costanzo, who is the facility operations coordinator at the Bluff Road landfill, had the idea of morphing our waste reduction guide into that public intersection with the climate action plan. So she is the brilliant person who came up with this idea and then pulled everyone together to make it happen. I just happened to be in the room with them. So here is our process map. I really will get to the guide in just a second. This is my joke of a process map for how we got there. So Willa invited all of these stakeholders from around the city. You've got traffic engineering, active living and nutrition, wastewater, Lincoln Water, that feeds our drinking water, municipal solid waste. I'm from Keep Lincoln-Lancaster County Beautiful here in the health department. And so we've just got a lot of folks around the table with a lot of different messages. So the first thing we talked about is that we want whatever this guide is, this final product, we want it to not feel like a government publication. We want it to be desirable. We want it to be picture-based and colorful and coded by color. We wanted it to transcend language where we could, to reduce language barriers. We wanted it to be informational and yet motivational, honest about climate and optimistic. So a handful of us work in behavior change, and we know that information alone is not sufficient to motivate change. So those were kind of the things that we wanted in terms of the feel. Yeah, Lauren.
Yeah, sorry. We have two quick questions. Someone is
Yeah.
asking, could you propose banning plastic grocery bags? I know other cities and states have done this.
Yes. I believe we actually have a state law that prohibits the ban of it bans bans is the easiest way to say it. So in the state of Nebraska, that is not currently a solution on the table? Great question.
And then someone else is asking, I see inappropriate items at the North 48th Recycling Center. Any way we can educate folks up front on this issue as it can result in a lot of inappropriate items being collected there?
Okay. Yes. Let me talk about illegal dumping when I get into the waste section here in just a second. I've noted it. I promise to come back to it. Thank you. Another thing that we ran into as we were planning this guide is that we all see and identify ourselves within different departments or sections of the city, and oftentimes to folks in the public, we're one entity. We are the city. So if you see something running down the storm drain, people will often say, call the city. There's a water main break, call the city. There is not a phone number for the city. And so we wanted to make sure that when we were interacting with folks, like in this situation, even if I get a question about water or transportation, I at least have a little bit of some way to guide the public to get to the right place within the city. We also wanted to make sure that we were giving a unified message so that watershed management wasn't saying one thing about litter and we were saying something different, especially opposing things. So we boiled down topics we wanted to cover. We settled on transportation, water, and waste, which is what I'm going to talk about, that illegal dumping piece. But that doesn't mean that's not, the next iteration of this may include other topics. We wanted to build the climate-related concerns and yet connect those with individual actions, individual opportunities for action so that there was something folks could do. We also wanted to show the incentives for the individual within this process about how folks could take climate-wise action that would improve their health or would save them money. And eventually we all got on the same page with a direction forward to move ahead. So in crafting, even like the waste section, which is what I'm most familiar with, there's a lot of challenging tension between using precise language that is technically accurate and using plain language that is clear and hitting at really the broadest sweep of the public that we serve. So for instance, in the waste section, we wanted to teach folks about circular economies. We wanted to make it really concrete and clear to people what we were talking about. So just as a for instance, right now, most of our economy is based on a linear economy. We extract natural resources, we make something, people use it, and then they throw it away. So that goes in a line.
Hey, sir, we have a question
Yeah.
asking, is there a citizen advisory council on these topics in Lincoln?
Yes. Yes, and they're all going to have unique citizen inputs on these. So for instance, like one of the topics that I think our guide is missing is local food. There's a ton of action around local food. There's been recent changes in municipal code around selling items from your garden. We're going to be talking more about food recovery. And so there is a local food team that's run out of the mayor's office out of sustainability. So when you talk about waste, we have a community advisory committee. We're also overseen by the Board of Health with our public meetings. So it kind of depends on which topic it is for which citizen advisory council. Multiple citizen opportunities to weigh in on each of these. So we wanted to teach folks that circular economy in contrast to the linear economy. So when it comes to sustainable materials management, it requires us to shift to that circularity. And here's a pretty simplified model of that from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. It's the kind of economy where you're designing to phase out waste. You're thinking about reusable bottles. You're thinking about refill. You're thinking about a phone that has the technology that you can pull in and pull out to give an update as opposed to a whole new phone. and the object becoming obsolete. So it requires all of that kind of thinking to get to a circular economy. So I am in no way saying we nailed it, but this is the kind of plain language we were looking for in our guide. So you will see on the left-hand side, it starts with take, make. It goes across to show that linear. Take, make, use, and dispose. We want to contrast with circularity. So yeah, we are going to miss some things, but we really want to move away from technical language that we might work with internally and make it tangible that folks can use. So this is a look at the guide, and within the guide, you may find, you will find more information about how to engage in the particular areas you're interested in. So if you're interested in being on those advisory councils, if you're interested in engaging and being a part of those teams, yes, let's get into this so that you can do that. So this is where we brought together the text. We brought together a graphic designer from Eleanor Creative to help make the images we wanted. Let's see here.
And Sarah, I just popped the link to the electronic guide in the chat for people to have after as well.
Slick. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And this guide, when you get on the web-based version, lincoln.ne.gov/recycle, you will find it in English and Spanish currently. So the transportation section is yellow. And you'll note there are things like the cost to maintaining the status quo, such as fuel for your personal vehicle or costs to your physical health, noting that about half of the city county is not meeting recommended aerobic activity. So we wanted to drive home the individual piece. We know there has to be systemic change, but this guide is about the individual actions. So the city continues to work on systemic solutions, but we want these actions to be on an individual level to get towards the collective. So here's page 2, and you're going to contrast that bleak first page with pollution and such with resources so that you can opt into more active transportation. There is a really great lesson here on iterative work, because no matter how many people reviewed this document, and I guarantee you there were a lot, we missed something really important. We got the first print copy of it, and my colleague went through it, Mary Carol Bond, and said, oh, where are their bike helmets and scooter helmets? We literally had dozens of people review the document, and we managed to miss safety helmets. I literally work for a place called the health department, and we missed helmets. So in the next iteration, I assure you, there will be helmets. So we are always trying to improve and get better. This is a great example of it. Next comes water, the color being blue. We wanted to convey some basic scientific concepts like the water cycle and watersheds pictorially. So we think that something like encouraging people to keep the storm water drains unpolluted makes a lot more sense, and there's a lot more motivation to do so. When it's implied that the stormwater drains into Salt Creek and then to Platte River, and then that's where we eventually get and source our drinking water from. So we hope that concepts like watersheds and water cycles would then motivate the public to think differently when it comes to things that they're interacting with, such as fertilizer and fertilizer pollution, if for no other reason than their own wellness. This connects back to where we get our own water from to stay well. So there's page 1 of the water. Here's page 2 of the water section. Again, page 2 in these sections tend to have information and resources. You all are a resource-driven group. You're like, give me the answers. I want to get in there. And so we wanted to give both the theory and some practice for folks. So this has information from assistance in locating leaks in your home related to water to cost share programs for landscaping that are available. So one of the guide words that we settled into for the feel of the guide was cheeky. We wanted it to be cheeky, like a little clever. we wanted the public to know that we weren't above a solid dad joke. So like, what are you waiting for? To try and engage the audience and keep it interesting. At the same time, we still wanted the information there so that if someone's really interested on capturing renewable energy from biosolids, which is it's a little more complicated, but it's poop from our wastewater systems, they could find that information too. So a little bit more lighthearted, a little cheeky, and yet information rich is what we were looking for. We were looking for that balance between growing interest in local programs to also serving folks who really feel like they're pretty well versed in what local programs offer. So now we get to the waste section. So again, this replaced that guide, that waste reduction guide, that chart you saw at the beginning. So this is what I worked on. And again, we did not nail it in finding that happy in between of technical language and plain language, but we're working on it. We wanted to provide some high level theory here before getting into the practical questions of what do I do with my insert item here. Again, you'll see jokes are integrated. Why are pirates so eco-friendly? They're always following the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. We wanted it to be memorable. We wanted it to be novel. But we also learned it later down the road. Boy, is it hard to do that and still be a translatable document for other languages. So again, lessons learned in doing new things. The waste section resource page kind of mirrors those others of the especially that old waste reduction guide. We were torn. There was a lot of discussion in our group. Do we just share the what bin does it go in tool and call it done? Or do we create pages like those charts that show all of the different items? And so we work from a behavior change strategy. So we want to reduce as many barriers as possible. So the solution for our team was to propose and use an entire page to propose items that you could search for in that what bin does it go in tool. So we drive people to the what bin does it go in page, and then they could use this to say, oh yeah, appliances. I want to see what to do with my washer or dryer when it's done. I want to search for what to do with textiles and clothing. So we want to not leave people hanging, and we want to give them some good information. So here's the last page. You'll see that pink waste page is the last waste page, followed by a big call to action. And that green page is where we want to inspire folks to take on a new behavior or continue a current healthy behavior like active transportation, buying secondhand products, conserving water, etc. We hope that in the previous sections we'd spelled out the individual costs, be it fuel, plumbing problems, healthcare, that might inspire that collective action that eventually turns into positive impact on air and water quality. We hope to begin the science literacy for the climate resilience community that we have to have. We have to have folks that understand basic scientific principles in order to be the most responsive that we can to climate mitigation and resiliency. We wanted to inform our residents of the opportunities that they have to support local sustainability efforts. We want them to understand how they can impact their local community on a daily basis. We wanted to do that while embodying what we were encouraging. So we printed a limited number of these, and we printed on 100% post-consumer recycled paper, and then we print more when we need them. So it was a good time for us to set out to measure and see if we had accomplished what we'd hoped to. And so we started figuring out how in the world we could study this. We worked with a group of undergraduate students in the spring of this year, in 2025, with a course called Environmental Engagement in the Community at UNL, Environment 319, and we did a study of the guide. We do plan to update this guide and continue to work iteratively with it so that folks have a place to interact with the city around these things, these topics. So we had 3 students from that class who said, yes, we will take on this project and evaluate this communication tool with the public.
Hey, Sarah, before you get into this, can you go back to the last slide? Someone has a clarifying question on the right when it says flush right. What are you referring to when you say that?
Yes. In the water section, it's talking about what can and can't be flushed. In city government, flushable wipes, that term, such a hot topic because they are not, in fact, flushable. I have yet to hear of any city plumbing that is meant to accept flushable wipes. Our systems can't take that. Our wastewater systems cannot handle them. And so I think there has been a little bit of walking back because you've got government and you've got industry. And I think they've had to talk to one another and be like, you really can't market it that way. This is not flushable. You have to get people not to flush these things. And generally, a lot of our wastewater issues, it's around what's coming down the toilet. We don't want folks flushing medications down the toilet. So only flushing the right things, which are bodily products and toilet paper. So that's what we mean by flush right. So students from this class, they got together, and the hope was that they would put together recommendations for the future when we get ready for a new iteration of this. So recall that when Willa pulled us around the table and said, hey, let's try to make something new, we settled on some shared big goals, which were create something positive, something inviting, something fun, and something packed with information. We wanted to be colorful, we wanted to be picture-based, and we wanted various city departments to be able to direct the public to where they needed to go. And we also wanted to provide a way for individual residents to contribute to Lincoln's climate action plan. We wanted to spell out their individualized incentive throughout this to do that too. So we accomplished some of those, but the study also revealed there are, of course, opportunities for improvement, lots of opportunities for improvement. So those are some of the questions that we were asking the students to evaluate. So they came back with things like this. So these are Fry graphs where we're scoring for readability. This tool is looking at sentence length, word length to get an estimated grade level. And we didn't just do one particular readability assessment. We did a few to make sure that we were getting well-rounded. Oh, it was a well-rounded assessment as well. So as someone who worked in the waste section of this piece, it's really clear to me that simplified plain language just has got to be a priority for us, because you can see when you compare the left side of your screen to the right side of your screen, the water section to the waste section, you can see that waste section language piece is just off the charts. There's just too many long words and sentences, and that we know does not work well for communication. So we've got to shift that. Another major finding from the research and the learned experience of trying to get this document translated is that we'd be much better off inviting those folks who are going to be translating this document into the conversation with us early on so that we can discuss things like the humor or something like the word plastic film. It is so hard to find the equivalence in other languages when you get down to the weird like descriptors like plastic film. And what I mean when I say plastic film, I mean something like a plastic bag. I mean stretchable plastic. So we really have to think about the language we're using on the front end even more possibly than the message. They've got to work together if we're going to be able to make this multilingual. There were some visually accessible or some visual accessibility pieces. We realized that we're compromised in the end. So I think we want to be more committed to that visual accessibility in the end. So for instance, the contrast, the colors ended up a lot darker. So that blue section with black text, not great for readability. So even some things like that. I think for us, though, the biggest reassurance, one of the findings the students had is that approximately 9 out of the 10 residents who did these surveys found that they would, in fact, still recommend this piece, the guide, to a friend or family member. And most of the people who said, no, I wouldn't do it, said that that was based on the assumption that everybody already knows this stuff. They already have this information and resources. And so while we didn't exactly nail it, we felt like we came to a really good starting place. That's it. I hope that you can see some of the problems that we set out to resolve, some of the problems that we encountered along the way in trying to do that, and to provide some waste education to the public. And while doing that, really integrate some larger sustainability things going on at the same time. We kind of, I think of the saying mountains beyond mountains. We by studying this in the end, we realize, oh, we still have a long way to go. There's still lots of barriers that we need to address for folks to be able to use this and engage locally. But that's okay. That's the work. We're here to do it. So I hope you have a better understanding of environmental public health as well, and a little bit more of our scope, so that you can also see how different departments might be engaging to try and get more unified messages and share the priorities of our city and county. I hope you've checked out the guide. If you haven't already, opened it in another window, share it with someone, dig into some of the actions, and pick something to begin saving our planet here locally. So
Thank you so much.
I missed,
you're good.
I lied. I said I was going to answer the question on illegal dumping and I didn't. So let me just answer the question now about specific recyclables collection sites. So it sounds like that's where we're seeing illegal dumping. So one of the things the city's done is they've consolidated those. Part of that's because of cost. So they've consolidated them so that we can also have a better handle on illegal dumping. That's just part of having a site that receives items from the public. There are going to be things that aren't put there. So the city continues to work on recycling messages. We work with our peers at Lincoln Transportation and Utility and the Waste Diversion Office all the time. That staff got an EPA grant and they're working on it right now, which is all about recycling education and outreach and message testing to see what other angles we can use to be most effective. So I assure you it is happening. You can always report when you see that. On this page, you've got the recycling hotline number. You can always call in. Those would be the folks that you would say, hey, I've noticed there's contamination here. If it's to a level of contamination where an entire load couldn't go to be recycled, I mean, those would be the folks that you would report it to. But hopefully, I think referring folks to this guide and people using that what bin does it go in tool will hopefully also reduce that contamination a bit.
Thank you for answering that already and for this amazing presentation. We have some questions already in the chat, but I'm going to launch our brief survey. Like I said before, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it if you take the time to fill it out. It takes less than a minute and it helps us with our programming and get some feedback on our end. While you guys fill that out, we're going to transition to questions. So our first question is, it's more just a general question, not as related to what you're discussing, but someone is asking, after viewing a few exposés on where recyclables end up, how can we be assured our recyclables end up at the right place and not a third world country for disposal?
Yeah, I think the first place to get online and see is to get onto that lincoln.ne.gov/recycle. Our Office of Waste Diversion has done a lot of work to film here locally that material recovery facility. So I think they've got video so that you can see your own waste. You can see your own waste going into the Bluff Road landfill. We have about just under 400 trucks, 385 trucks a day taking landfill garbage, and then contrasting that with our material recovery facilities. So you can see when that recycling truck pulls in, tips on the tipping room floor, and that's Lincoln's recycling, so you can actually see it. The other thing would be to call that hotline number and have a conversation with someone. When you have concerns about whether or not recycling is really happening, the first place that we send folks is we say, talk to your hauler. And that's why I mentioned the path and that Lincoln's waste system is really set up to be those private haulers. That's your first call. If you think that your recycling isn't really happening, I would start with your hauler and find out. That's if you're paying for that service, we want to make sure it's happening. So call that private business and tell them your concerns. Our hauling community, I'm sure, would be open to hearing your concerns. Our material recovery facilities, I've gotten to see it. They're up and running. I've seen it. I know First Star Recycling, if you're in Omaha, think they often welcome folks to tour their site and see warehouse after warehouse after warehouse building of conveyor belts and these materials just running through operations. So I know it doesn't always work perfectly. If you wanted me to assure you that every single product every time ends up exactly where we want it to, I couldn't do that. But the system on the whole is working and functioning. And with us in the Midwest, there's a cost of transportation that's working to benefit us to keep those materials here locally, because it costs money every time there's transportation involved. And so it does help us keep local economies. We're not going to bail that aluminum. That business isn't going to bail it and have to ship it really far. They're going to try to find your closest aluminum smelter to spread it out and make a new aluminum can and get it back here on the shelves, you know. So there's costs involved that are helping with some of that too.
Yes, for sure. I mean, it's not as helpful not of me saying that they've both already happened, but I'm hoping that they happen in the future. This summer, through Conservation Nebraska, we've helped organize a Lincoln landfill tour, and we just had a First Star Fiber tour in Omaha a week or two ago.
Yes.
And I think it's really helpful to see where your waste ends up firsthand.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that they do them in the future. I will not be there, but if you want to check back or keep saying that you'd like to go to on another one, that would help us do that again in the future. But especially for Star Fiber, they do have tours more frequently. But
Yeah.
anyway, our next
Yeah.
question is, are there hard copies of the guide available for Lincoln citizens?
Yes. We'll often table with them. Again, a lot of my job is outreach as well. And so like I happen to know on Thursday we'll be at the Salt Dogs game doing has to go information, you know, and we'll definitely have copies there. Probably the easiest thing would be to get in touch with me and I can get you hard copies. Again, we're just trying to reduce the actual waste itself any way we can, but I'm happy to give people hard copies who will use them. So I'd say contact me directly. Oh, and then I
Uh,
see that last question
yes, we
there.
have one more question. I'm just gonna push one more time. If you all could fill out the survey, I would greatly appreciate it. But this our question right now says, if I want to start an environmental activist group, what do you suggest as best first steps? I'm thinking about like cleaning up parks, community gardening basics, encouraging pollinators, seed exchanges specifically for native plants, etc., etc. Beyond Conservation Nebraska, there's really nothing currently active in the state as far as I've found. Please correct me if that's not true.
Yeah. I think I would say dig into this guide a little bit more. So, for instance, one of the things you'll find in the waste section, you mentioned cleaning up parks. You'll find our litter reduction activities. So, you could engage in a volunteer litter cleanup and get equipment from us at the health department. You could also engage in one of our grants where we pay by mile, by acre, thanks to the state funding to do litter cleanup. So I know that's one right away. When it comes to native plants, a lot of times you're talking about those drought resistant plants. I'd say check that water section. I think there are actually a lot of things going on, but you're right that we also need, it can't just be government. So I guess my first tip would be dig in so that you know what government resources are there. And then I would say build from that wonderful building block of Conservation Nebraska, your local government, getting to know those resources using something like the guide and just spending time on the website, getting to know everything that's out there. Um, and then filling in the gap so that it's not duplicative, so that everyone's driving towards those goals. And I think something like the climate action plan is a really great driving place to get us all focused on the same goals. Think about those key initiatives. How might whatever you design and organize, how might it be tackling one of the challenges that we currently already face?
Um, that yeah. And then kind of building off of that, if you have any feedback or input of like events that you'd like us to host, we are always looking for feedback, or if there's certain places in Lincoln or across the state that you're wanting to host like a park cleanup or something like that, we would love to collaborate. We're always trying to think of new places to go. in Lincoln and Omaha or anywhere in the state. But our next question is, can you put a plug for the new store being built at the hazmat collection site?
Yes, I can. So I'm really excited about this. When we talk about a circular economy, this is part of it. So at Has to Go, where we collect household hazardous waste, we are going to, instead of us spending city, state dollars to then dispose of that waste, when we get good usable product, where I'm not saying the products aren't without harm, but they still have a usefulness to them, a helpfulness, maybe some wood stain. We're gonna, instead of paying to dispose of them, we're gonna put them back on the shelf and they'll be available for free to the public use. So if you haven't been out to Has to Go, Lincoln's Hazardous Waste Center, you're that operation's continuing. We'll continue to take your household hazardous waste. We're just going to sort it a little differently. And if we think there's still good use that other people could get out of it, it's going right up on a shelf for other people to get at no cost. So I'm really excited. That's that circular economy. That's where we're heading. And so that's going to be anything that we should open up here in the next season. I would say by late winter, we'll be up and rolling. So stay tuned for that.
Amazing. If do we have any final questions? Thank you again, Sarah, for your time and for your presentation. Um,
Thank you, Lauren, and thanks for all the really good questions. If you
yes,
feel like I
amazing
didn't do them
questions today.
justice, please feel free to contact me and I can give you better, less off the cuff
Yes,
answers.
I will be sending a follow-up email to all those in attendance today, and I'll share your contacts here if you're all right with
Great.
that. But yeah,
Absolutely.
if we don't have any more questions, I think that concludes our webinar today. If you haven't gotten a chance to fill out the survey, as I've said, I will reiterate how we would greatly appreciate if you take the time to fill it out. If you want to share this with someone who wasn't able to attend tonight, or if you want to watch it again, this webinar will be posted on our YouTube in the near future with all of our past webinars. Thank you so much for attending today's webinar and learning more about environmental health and action, your guide to saving the planet. Excuse me. And most importantly, thank you, Sarah, for this presentation and giving us your time and talent. I hope everyone has a good rest of your day. Thank you all.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks all.
Thank you.